like everybody else, I like to be seen to be doing work that matters. So if there is a crisis, I like to be seen to be doing something about that crisis. But then there's always a crisis, which does mean that if you're not careful, pretty soon your days are just spent chasing the crisis, the latest one, through to its inevitable conclusion. Wouldn't be easy to be Noah, would it? Because he's not chasing an obvious crisis. Nobody thinks that the flood is a crisis because no one sees it coming. But he's still got to build this massive, great boat with no apprenticeship in ark building. All those trees he's got to cut down. All those explanations that he's got to make to people. This is why I'm doing it. Yes, it must seem funny to you. Over and over and over again. As someone pointed out this week, maybe not the worst part of being Noah that. Maybe the worst part of being Noah is once the flood comes and a lot of people who you love are outside hammering on the hull of the boat as it rises. Anyway, for you, as Noah, the floodwaters are lifting you up. So the waters that mean destruction for everybody else, and for you and your family, they mean salvation, and they mean a new start, and they mean a renewed earth. Because God's will is good and pleasing and perfect, you see themes just reworked, revisited, recollected. There's even one other verse in the Bible which links an ark with pitch, bitumen, It's actually in Exodus chapter 2, where, the papyrus basket is a papyrus ark, and it's coated with pitch. So, there's the theme renewed. And of course, there's the waters of the Nile, which mean death to all these other babies. But for baby Moses, it means a journey to a new start, new part of God's plan of salvation. But it's all linked in the end to Judgment Day. It's linked to that by Jesus, who is our ultimate Noah, our ultimate ark, of course. And Jesus is asked a question about the day of judgment. He's asked a question by his disciples. Now, they got it a bit tangled up because they were talking about the temple. Jesus talks about the destruction of the temple. They think, well, that must be the same day as the day of judgment, the final day, the day, that day. It's not. And Jesus talks in a way that untangles the two events. One, you can predict when it will be, and you can tell people what to expect, and the church did expect it, and it did happen. That was the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. The other event that Jesus talks about, that day of judgment, well, that only the Father knows when that will be. So when he's talking about it, as he does in Matthew 24, Jesus can't tell them when, but what can he tell them? Well, he gets them thinking about the days of Noah. He gets them thinking about how the flood caught everyone unprepared. Well, it's not quite true. The way Jesus talks about it, it makes you think about how prepared they were. Because he talks not about the slightly lurid events, or very lurid events, that Genesis 6 highlights, but he talks about the mundane events that would have been going on. Weddings, feasts, drinking parties. Now you have to prepare for those things. You've got to get enough twiglets in if you're going to have the neighbours round for cheese and wine. So those things do take preparation. That's where all the preparation went. But what they weren't prepared for, they were prepared for weddings, some of which never took place, and feasts, some of which never took place, but they were not prepared for the day of judgment which came upon the world at that time, and that most certainly did take place. They weren't ready. Jesus says that's how it will be in the end. And hopefully that itself is enough to get us all asking ourselves, what am I preparing for these days? I say hopefully because Jesus goes on to apply this warning to all his disciples. As I say, Jesus is the ultimate Noah, the ultimate ark. But like Noah, those who are in Jesus will have work to do, hard work, for an unseen master. See, Hebrews 11:7. No good at numbers, but check it out. You'll find Noah in there. They'll have work to do for an unseen master, for an unseen day, for an indefinite period of time. Now that is a test of faith. Point made, Jesus proceeds to reinforce it. All the subsequent parables have these themes of time and an absent or invisible or unseen master. There's the faithful and wise servant who has the rather Noah-like task of keeping the household fed and watered. Now the faithful and wise one will be discovered doing exactly that by his delighted master and promoted. The wicked servant, on the other hand, will deceive himself that his master isn't coming back and will proceed to treat the house and all its contents as though they were his own. Time does this. It accentuates the difference between the two servants. The foolish virgins, 5 of them are prepared for a long wait, however long the wait may be. The others have just assumed that it won't be long. Wrongly, as it turns out. And in the end they arrive at the door of the feast, but like the people of Noah's day, they find that the door has been shut. They're in the darkness. Back to servants again, the parable of the talents. You have 3 servants who have been entrusted by their master with his money while he goes away for a long period of time. And that time is long enough to again accentuate the difference between the servants, because 2 of them, in his absence, proceed to act as they would imagine him acting. What would the master do with this money? Let's lay it out in the directions that he would lay it out. And one of them puts his feet up. There's a clear difference between these servants, and you hear it. Well done, good and faithful servant. The attitude of the first 2 servants has delighted their master, and he puts them in charge of more because he wanted them to grow into this role. That's what the absence was all about. The 3rd servant doesn't meet with quite the same reaction. So the question for me then is, how can I build a routine that holds good and prepares me, puts me in readiness for the return of my Lord? And I don't think that can be done just by taking today's crisis and trying to show that I'm doing something about it, because everybody thinks they've got a crisis. If I'm driven by that, I think I'm probably going to end up wasting my time on this planet. So what I think I've got to do is to wake up every grey February day, lockdown day, ordinary mundane day, and yeah, there are things that I have to do, but first and foremost I have to take hard, serious, focused, straight aim at the moment, however near or far in history, when I hear the Master's voice saying, well done, good and faithful servant. I've got to hear that in my mind's ear every day and aim for it and look to deserve it. If you have been, thank you for listening.